My name's Steve Rader. I am the program manager for NASA's Center of Excellence for Collaborative Innovation and the NASA Tournament Lab, which I'll talk a little bit about up front, but get into what it is really a little bit later. We basically help programs and projects across NASA and the entire federal government to help understand what open innovation is and to execute it effectively. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'll come back to that, but I like to start with the why, right? It's a very Simon Sinek type of question. But a lot of folks see open innovation in this kind of novelty light, and we've been working this since 2011. And what we found is it is actually a crucial tool, and it comes down to this why. And this is something that you hear every single day, and that is that the world has changed. But I'm going to contend that I'm going to make a case that it has changed in some ways that we don't fully appreciate, and to the level that things that we have done over and over the years and are so used to doing and thinking they're effective are starting to break. And so some of that is driven by simply where we are in the arc of the world, right? The world's population, and this is a plot from the Common Era start up until now, and the first doubling took 1,400 years. But in my lifetime, because I'm over 50, it has more than doubled in one lifetime. And that has some significant implications, because at the same time, the world has gotten richer. And over the last 30 to 40 years, there have been new universities and technical schools all around the world, to the point that in secondary education, over just the past 20 years, the number of people graduating has over doubled, 2.5 times. And so what this has created is this situation that's kind of unique. Think back to when you were in university, right, and all those textbooks that you had, and think about how long it took to come up with chemistry and the algebra and calculus and all of those things, starting with the early Greek philosophers and all the way through. If you take all those scientists that were responsible for doing that, largely all dead, right? They account currently for 1/10 of all the scientists that have ever lived on planet Earth. The other 90% are alive and working today. 9 times more than everyone responsible for the tech that came into being before us, right? And what that's created is this tsunami of technology. And it is such that it is coming faster and faster, and in quantities that are really quite unfathomable. If you think about it, there's a set of these that are building block technologies, things like 3D printing and blockchain and AI and software APIs and complex manufacturing, nano coatings, even CRISPR. You can go out and buy like a $200 CRISPR kit and go edit the genome, which just scares the living daylights out of me. But these technologies are really interesting because they each have significant complexity under the covers, but a lot of them have kind of a veneer of easy to use and easy to learn. And in fact, many of them, you can get online and learn how to use them in a fairly short order. But probably one of the most interesting thing is all of these technologies, and this is just a partial list. These building block technologies don't apply to a single industry. They apply to almost every industry. And so what's happening is these 9 times as many scientists and researchers that we've ever had have better tools and are out in every industry innovating and creating new technologies and solving hard problems. And well, let me just kind of show what that would look like. If you're looking across and plotting those technologies across all of the different domains along the x-axis there, and maybe getting more complex in the y, and so this one slice is your industry, right? If you say you took all the efforts going on with AI, right, and you plotted them, you'd say, hey, yeah, I'm NASA. I've got lots of initiatives going on in this area, but so does everyone, right? And in fact, some of the most advanced work might be over here with John Deere, because I don't know if you know this, but John Deere is one of the leading folks in AI and automation, right? Right? Like your automation, right? And so if I go into that meeting as a NASA guy and I say, okay, you're showing me this tech, but it's for this farming problem and you're using farming jargon and you come up with a farming solution, then I'm going to walk away from that and go, that's great that they have that AI for them, but that doesn't do much for me. But it turns out that there are some people that do understand the jargon, that do understand the problems, and they're able to actually transfer those ideas and those technologies and say, oh, if you just change that technology a little bit, you can actually come over here and solve one of our problems. And that's happening more and more. And the pro is that at no other time in history have we had so many amazing solutions that are actually getting implemented in different areas that have the potential to be even broader in their application. But the con, and this is a huge con, is that you can't find them. If you think you can Google the latest and greatest in technology to try to solve your problem, then you don't understand how big the tsunami is, how fast it's coming, and all the nuances of what's behind it. The way we used to do that is come to some conferences, talk to some vendors, talk to some old folks that have been around, and you could get a lock on what the latest and greatest technology you needed to tap into to go and make your next product. And you could spend 3 or 4 years developing that product and take it to market, and it's still the cutting edge. That is not the case anymore. The rate is too fast, and you've got to actually find ways to where you're tapping into not only the technologies in these other industries, but the expertise that's out there in these cutting edge. So this is what we have. This is my panic slide. You should be panicked. Your blood pressure should be going up at this point. The rate of change for knowledge and technology is increasing, right? And that means it's hard to find the skills and expertise to even go understand the technologies that might or might not affect you. And it's hard to keep up with the tech advances. And for all of us, government included, there is a high risk of us remaining competitive and relevant, right? For NASA, we've got all sorts of other governments doing space work. We've got lots of commercial. And as soon as NASA's solutions that we put out there are 10 times more expensive and not as capable as what everyone else is doing, some taxpayers are going to start asking, why? Why are we funding you, right? So this is a really important piece, not just for commercial, but it is something that's happening in commercial. I think you've seen this over the years. It's kind of a dated slide at this point. But companies are actually succumbing to the disruption, right? I like this one better. It talks about the average lifespan of not any company, but our most successful companies. 100 years ago, it was almost 100 years, like 90 years. And it is now, I think the latest number I've heard was like 14 years. And that's because of this change, right? A company has to have a product that the longevity of that product is oftentimes linked to the longevity of the company, right? And so we see it. I'm going to give an example of this. There's an oil and gas company called Subsea 7. Some of you might know of them. But one of the things they do is they inspect pipeline bundles that go from offshore oil rigs back to the shore. And they will take a ship out at $1 million a day. They'll drop a van-sized piece of equipment next to that pipeline bundle, and then they'll take about 2 weeks to scan that, to inspect it. They went out with 9 Sigma to find, is there a better way? Is there something happening in technology that will make this faster, cheaper, easier to do? And within 2 weeks, they were able to find a technology already in use in the mining industry that was handheld and could do that job not in 2 weeks, but 2 hours. Now that's 100x improvement, right? Everybody's gonna be really happy about that. But the interesting comment they made was, if we had not found that technology before our competitors, we would no longer be in that business. And this is happening over and over and over, right? So if I come back to our plot, if I believe, and I do, and I've seen it, that these technologies, these solutions, these ideas are out there across these industries, if I, in my domain, in my industry, assign an individual to be an innovator. That's great. Individuals are great, they can innovate, but this person's going to be limited to what they can see and even understand. If I put a team on that, teams always work better, right? But they're going to be hired in the scope of what my industry is, and their visibility is going to be limited. But it turns out, if I use the crowd acts as a statistical dragnet across all industries in a way where humans in the human networks can actually be the ones to connect those dots and bring them in a way that nothing else can do right now. Now, generative AI might be nipping at the heels here, but it's not quite there yet because of the complexities. And so that's what I want to chat about. That's the why. This is one of the only tools and approaches to meet that crucial need of how do you keep up and find the cutting edge technologies, expertise, and ideas that are out there that you need, and if you don't get them and your competitor does, you're in trouble, right? So this is open innovation. Open means going outside your organization. That's all it means. It can mean going outside your group within your organization or going outside your company entirely to find those technologies, skills, and ideas. So you can kind of think of it as Airbnb or Uber, right? These are matching platforms out there that recruit assets, so Uber drivers on one hand or rental properties on the other, and all they're doing is matching. They're doing high performing, low friction matching at scale, right? So if somebody needs a ride, they match you with a driver, and they do that in moments, most of the time, except when you're in a hurry. And then, you're set. And this is a global crowd of drivers, right? And they're doing that really efficiently. Same with Airbnb. One point to add on this. Anybody remember when Uber just came out? What was the first thing everyone said? There's no way I'm getting in a stranger's car. I will be murdered, right? Do you remember that gut reaction? Almost everyone had it. And then within months, everyone forgot about that because they'd done some things and they believed. But even today, I think you'd be like, I don't know why I trust it. Like, same with Airbnb, right? There's no way I'm going to go sleep in someone else's bed. That's kind of gross. And now we do it all the time, right? So part of this is trust, which I'll come back to a little bit later. So at NASA, we put a program together a few years ago where we started using curated crowds. So these are commercial crowds out there where they're kind of two-sided networks. They've stood up a platform, they've recruited people, often around a passion like software development or data science or filmmaking or just hard problems. And on that side, you're coming to connect with other people that have that passion, maybe to learn something, and maybe even to make some money or prove yourself, right? In crowdsourcing, we call it the 4 Gs, gold, guts, glory, and good, or the 4 reasons people participate, right? But they join for socialization and learning, right? And there are over 700 of these platforms around the world. So while you might not know of many, they are out there. Top Coder, 1.8 million software developers and data scientists in one community. If you go to Freelancer, it's 75 million people in one community. That's 1% of the world's population, roughly, or pretty close. GrabCAD, 13 million mechanical engineers and designers, all in one community. Wazoku, HeroX, these are companies who bring crowds together that all they like to do is solve hard problems. Wazoku, I think, has something like 75% master's PhD in their crowd. Very smart people who aren't getting what they want out of their job, and so at night will get online to solve hard problems. The other side of this network is not the solvers, it's actually enterprises like NASA, like P&G, who basically are using these crowds to get value, to get a product, to get a piece of software, an algorithm, an idea, a technology, find a technology, and they leverage these crowds to go do that, right? I didn't mention we also have a NASA Spark, which is our internal community. So at NASA, we don't always go all the way out. Sometimes we'll say, hey, have we already solved this inside the organization? And it turns out to be a really great enterprise knowledge sharing tool. So this is the way the theory works. If expertise is what you need, right? And it isn't always, but if it is, then you could plot expertise kind of this way, right? Where you're getting smarter and smarter as you go out. And then the distribution would look something like this, right? Your high school graduates are the peak here around the world, and then you've got your college graduates out here, and then way out to the far right is your world's expert, right? And if you're like NASA, you don't even hire people unless they're meeting a pretty high threshold, and then you also have some of the world's experts. But what I tell our people, and I will tell you, is that's absolutely true, except the curve isn't that big. There's 60,000 people total with our contractors for all of NASA. And so the value proposition lies in this long green tail here of people that are as smart or smarter than the resources we have. And it turns out that these curated communities have some of those people, right? Now, I will say, smarts isn't always the thing you need. Sometimes you need that person that can simply connect the dots. And in fact, there's a study out of MIT and Harvard that basically looked at, in Incentive, one of these companies, and all of their successes. And what they found was really interesting. For every time they showed a success, they looked at who solved this problem. And it turned out that 70% of the time, the problem that solved a problem of industry, that industry had been working on for like 5 years and not been able to solve, they bring it to an Incentive and they solve it. That person 70% of the time was not in the same domain as the problem owner. So if it was a chemist trying to solve a chemistry problem, it was actually somebody in this other industry or other domain that maybe also had chemistry training, but they weren't sitting there and kind of isolated. There's a lot of literature out there about innovation and how you can have this kind of bubble effect in expertise. And this really shows that. And 75% of the time, they already knew the solution before they even saw the problem. In other words, it existed in this other industry, and all they had to do was connect the dots and show it. Right? And I have witnessed this over and over and over. So it's not always the smarts. Sometimes it's the people that happen to have the right experience, the right visibility, and the right knowledge all at the same time to meet and answer the problem that you're trying to solve. So just because a crowd can do it doesn't mean it's easy, right? Like just because I can access 75 million people at Freelancer, somebody's going to have to cull that, to get that out of them and cull that down. And it turns out that the magic algorithm for this, at least right now, is contests. You don't think of that as an algorithm, but it is. But it's an algorithm that has to be executed well. And these companies have gotten really good at doing this. They know how to formulate the problem statement. They know how to design the challenge. How many prizes? How much should the prizes be? How long should it be open? They know how to execute it and have a website that has all the terms and conditions laid out and cleared with legal. They know how to take all the rights attachments. They know how to solution filter. And I'll just say, we had a challenge where we had 5,000 submissions come in. And we said, hey, in the contract that says you're only going to give us the ones that meet our requirements. And so they had to filter all of those, and we ended up with the 87 that met all our requirements out of 5,000, right? So an important piece, because you don't just want everything. You want the high quality stuff that starts to float to the top. They help you pick the winners, right? They have ways to help you do that. And then an important piece, they know how to deal with intellectual property and any sort of proprietary concerns. The one question I get every time I give this talk is about, what about IP? These companies have been working on this for 10 years, and they know how to kind of obfuscate who you are so that nobody knows that you're doing this challenge. It looks like some other kind of challenge. And they know when should you be asking for a license versus all-out IP, versus actually leaving the IP with them because you're simply trying to stimulate the economy and trying to get a startup going, right? So you don't always even want it. For NASA, we typically try to get a license to use, right? So they can sell it to other people, but we've pretty much purchased what we're going to purchase there, right? So I'll give some examples. This is a somewhat famous one. A lot of people use this. But a few years ago, at Incentive, which is now Wazoku, a major potato chip company came and said, look, we need a better way to remove the grease off of our potato chips. What they were doing is they were taking the trays of chips as they came out of the vat of oil, and they were vibrating those chips, right? Shaking off the oil. And that would break a good chunk of the potato chips, right? And we as humans only like the big ones, right? Until we get to the end of the bag, but that's a whole other thing. And what I want to point out here is mechanical engineers largely drive food production, right? They're the ones that are there. And I'm a mechanical engineer, and one of our expertise is vibration. Like if you want the world's experts in vibration, you go to mechanical engineers, ta-da, you can see it, right? Well, they ran this challenge, but the first thing they did is they said, well, instead of posting a challenge where we say, like, how do you remove grease from potato chips, that will only kind of appeal to food scientists and food production engineers, they said, let's change that to be, how do you remove a viscous fluid from a delicate wafer? Now that did two things, right? One, I no longer know this is a potato chip company, right? So it obscured it from a competitiveness standpoint. Their competitors would not know they're running this challenge. But more importantly, this is now a challenge, even though it's a nerdier way to say it, this now applies to almost anyone who understands viscosity, delicate wafers, kind of the physics of that. It's a much broader group, right? Turns out the solution that came in and that was selected was to acoustically vibrate the air around the chips at a frequency that was resonant with the oil, and the oil would just fly off. You've seen this, right, where they have the big boom boxes and the water dances on the floor. Same idea. And the person that brought this to them wasn't a mechanical engineer. It was a violinist who had seen the rosin dance on her stand when she played, understood the mechanics just like everyone else. I would argue is also a vibration specialist. But all of the mechanical engineers in the food industry had remained blind to that solution for over 50 years. And it took someone outside of the bubble to point them to that solution. I can do so many examples, and I'll give a few more. But one of the things we found is data science, which is a little bit of a hot thing right now, right? The one thing that crowdsourcing does better than anything is data science. And it does that for several reasons I'll talk about in a minute. I'll just give this example. Harvard was trying to study, and we work with them a lot, Dr. Kareem Lakhani at the Laboratory for Innovation Sciences at Harvard. And one of the things they were trying to figure out is crowdsourcing just finding the same couple of experts every time, and we're just tapping into that, or is something else happening? Because we were getting crazy good results. And so they did this experiment where they took the National Institutes of Health's megablast algorithms, kind of their workhorse for doing this kind of antibody sequence annotation. It had taken them a couple $1 million and a few years to develop. It ran in just over 4 hours per machine, okay? So, and its accuracy is about 0.72. They first, as a control, took data scientists that were top-notch. They already knew they were top-notch and had domain expertise. They gave them a year, $120,000, and at the end of that year, they had increased the performance such that that algorithm could run in 47 minutes, an order of magnitude improvement. Now it can do 10 runs a day, and up to the accuracy to 0.77, right? They then did a 2-week marathon match on Topcoder with a $6,000 prize. And at the end of that, they had an algorithm could run in 16 seconds and an accuracy that was even higher at 0.8. What I like to show here is this is logarithmically getting faster from left to right, so orders of magnitude, right? This is the winner, 2 to 3 orders of magnitude higher. These are the 25 losers who all had solutions 2 to 3 orders of magnitude better. When you're doing data science, you're trying to find the right way to cut the data, and then the right approach to apply, and then you've got to set about 38 different parameters. And so it's a permutations game. So a single group is going to try a permutation, see how it works. Try a permutation, see how it works. And it's serial. This is parallel. And you're not paying for failure. You're only paying the winners. So you end up with 5 or 6 that actually get scored at the highest performance, and you hand that to your data scientists and say, okay, I just saved you 3 years, now go and do even better things, right? So, by the way, there were 89 different approaches, which if in data science, that's gold right there. because you can combine those. So our program at NASA, again, we were stood up in 2011 at the request of the Office of Science and Technology Policy at the White House because they saw the value of open and they wanted to get that going around the government. We had done some work in that, and so they said, can you help not just NASA, but other federal agencies? And so that's what we did. We basically stood up a Center of Excellence, and what we realized was, if you're gonna put something new, a new tool, this new tool that's important for everyone to know how to use, then you can't just put it out there and point to it and say, go use that. You have to actually kind of make a path. And so we basically put a bunch of an ecosystem together, if you will, by actually putting on contract many of these companies, and then made processes and equipped a team of customer service agents that basically helped to bring people through this process so that it was a good experience. If anything new, everyone's gonna have an excuse for why they shouldn't have to use this, and we try to make sure it's a good experience. We actually do this largely through contracting. We have our multi-vendor IDIQ contract where we actually have 32 different crowds on there, and we basically compete task orders on that. And we put fixed price task orders on that and have any one of those companies can win that, and then they turn around and run a competition, using either procurement or competes authority. Getting kind of nerdy there. You can ask me about that later if you want. But all told, we even do crowdsourcing activities on a government purchase card, as long as it's less than $10,000. And we found we can do amazing things and engage the public. And it turns out one of NASA's kind of strengths is public support. And so it turns out when we ask people to help be part of the mission, it's much better than the old days where we said, hey, look at the cool stuff we're doing. Don't you wish you were us, right? We want to invite people in to help us solve these problems. And we want to get past the perception here. For years, we've done student competitions, and there's been all sorts of contests, which are great, but they're not taken seriously as ways to do science and engineering. And what we've found is this is an excellent way to actually jumpstart and get science and engineering actually happening, and to start creating a network of valuable people. So all total, I think we have about 200 million people on contract through these crowds. Right now, there's the Noise 3, our third generation contract. It's gonna be a 10-year contract, almost $500 million cap, that is gonna open up here in the next few weeks for new crowds to kind of come on board. So exciting time for us in that regard. So I mentioned our internal crowd, NASA Spark. Our external brand name is the NASA Tournament Lab. So we're a center of excellence, we help people, but if you're kind of a solver and want to solve things, you would look for the NASA Tournament Lab. And just to give you a few examples here of challenges that we've done. One was a solar forecasting model, right? Where the space station astronauts, when they go outside and are on EVA on space station, it can take them a couple of hours to get back in and safe. And so if a solar flare is coming, we want them inside as fast as possible. And so we had about a 2-hour prediction capability. We were trying to get to 4. And when we ran this challenge on an incentive, we ended up, for just about $50,000, by the way, finding someone who actually was able to generate an 8-hour prediction capability. And what was really fascinating there is this was someone who was a retired cell phone engineer who happened to have taken heliophysics as his minor many years ago. And it turns out when you take the RF processing math and apply it to heliophysics, you get this new capability. So it is that kind of taking two domains and putting it together. On the Exploring Hell, we were actually looking at trying to put, we're still trying to put a probe on Venus, and it's very hot on Venus. Like the longest a probe has lasted is like 30 minutes. And so we're looking to try to actually, maybe it's 52 minutes, sorry. So we're trying to get something to last for many months. And so instead of sensor-based navigation, we're looking for mechanical-based. And we did a challenge around this, 572 submissions. And we ended up selecting, I think, about 5 of those. What's interesting is the effort people went to. Like, people would actually go build full-scale prototypes for the chance at that $30,000 prize. So activating people's ingenuity and their smarts and what they're doing is kind of what these challenges are really good at doing. And it's interesting because everyone in our agency is starting to hop on. John Mather is an actual Nobel Prize winning space scientist who's the one who detects planets, and he's trying to build a mission that has 100-meter ultralight star shades, which are these kind of shapes you're seeing here, where you can actually put that shape between the telescope and the star, and it'll filter out the starlight that's direct, and then you can see the planets in that. We ended up running on GrabCAD for $10,000 a challenge where we actually got 60 designs. It jump-started his whole development system, and again, total cost to the government $10,000. Because GrabCAD does this to entertain their crowd, not to try to actually have somebody trying to make money out or make a living out of it. So that's open innovation. We've been doing that now for a while. I'll show some stats on how much we've done. But one of the things we noticed in 2017 is many of the communities that we were working with weren't just doing open innovation, they were doing gig economy stuff and open talent. And this idea of people moving into the workforce that wasn't full-time was kind of starting to take off. And we started studying that, and what we noticed was not only were the standard kind of gig platforms you think about, but talent platforms started popping up, like Upwork and Top Talent, Freelancer, and Maven, where instead of in a challenge matching a problem with a solution out there, you just needed something done. You needed an expert to help you, and these platforms go and match the best person that they can find out there. And it turns out, with the rapid change in skills, that's a really valuable thing these days. One of the studies that came out that we saw in 2017 was that people were moving into the freelance open talent workspace at 3 times the rate they were moving into regular jobs. To the point that in 2019, over 40% of average workforces were not full-time. And in fact, the trend was showing that by 2027, there would be more people employed in the US as freelancers than as full-time. And we said, whoa, if this is even partially true, we're gonna have a hard time finding talent, and we need to somehow tap into this trend. And then COVID happened. And COVID sped everything up. In fact, there's an MBO Partners study that showed that just between 20 and 21, there was a 34% increase. That other increase was 4% a year increase. And it jumped to 34%. So we're seeing this. World Economic Forum in 2020 came out with a report that kind of reinforced all of this. That said, look, coming out of COVID, there are a ton of jobs that are starting to go away. Data entry clerks, accounting, factory workers, to the tune of 85 million. But that same study showed that 97 million new jobs were on their way. But what's the problem there? Well, reskilling, upskilling. And that study showed that 50% of all employees are going to have some upskilling, and the average was 40% of their skills. The average budget for reskilling in companies is about $1,000 per employee per year. And that's actually just training. That's more for compliance and security than it is for anything else. And so nobody's ready for this inside their companies. And this idea that we have to have lifelong learning is now a given, right? The rate of change mandates it. And I tell people, the acquire and retain strategy that we have used in organizations for over 100 years is breaking. I talk to more HR managers every day who are telling me that they have a skill shortage and a hiring freeze. Why? Because you can't onboard all the skills you need without somebody going out the door, right? And so we're seeing a lot more people starting to look at this problem of training, and again, that study was showing the training needed to do that level of upskilling is anywhere from 1 to 4 months, or 1 to 5 months, way outside the budget for most organizations. But when you look at what the freelancers are doing, they by far are doing their own upskilling because they do that to be competitive, right? And so there's this kind of shift we're watching and monitoring where this new workforce is emerging. And it's interesting because it defies some of the stereotypes. It is both on demand and persistent. We're finding more and more people, yes, they use one-off freelancers, but they also will hire people and keep going back to them and form a relationship and include them in their teams and culture. They're both local and global, right? Your Uber driver is a global crowd, but they show up at your door, right? And that's the same with these expert types in labor. They range from grunt workers all the way to experienced experts. We have been able to hire and bring in through this mechanism, because we actually expanded the noise contract to include open talent workers so that we could access the experts. We brought in an expert on wicked problems. We've brought in experts on software conversion and algorithms, experts in differential privacy. How many of those do you know? They are doing this lifelong learning. What I tell people is you can almost never find cutting edge skills in your organization. Now they might exist there, but they're always busy, right? So accessing those cutting edge skills is almost impossible within your organization. However, in the open talent marketplace, you will always be able to find and access cutting edge talent. There's not a maybe there. You can always find it. It's just statistics. And then they're providing lower and lower friction, right? So there's more and more where people are pre-vetted with background checks and pre-vetted with different experiencers training, standardization of training so that you don't have to have this real custom IT training and whatnot. So there's matched to specific needs. Many of these platforms are recording the digital exhaust of their workers so that they understand not just what they can do, but the nuances of how well they work doing it. How many of your HRs are doing that? Not very many, right? And then they're using AI when a task comes in and says, okay, who's best to do this job? And they're using that level of information to do that. What's interesting, there's one called Paro.io, does financing and accounting. They actually include upskilling in their crowd by, instead of matching to the most qualified person, they match to the least most qualified person. So that person is then getting extra reinforcement training and their crowd is getting smarter every day. Like, don't you wish your company did that, right? So we're watching this. We've been engaged. We work with Open Assembly, which is trying to actually really get a handle on this. But it's out there. It's happening. Lots of folks are trying to figure out how to do it, but it is at odds with full-time employment models. There's a lot of people questioning, is it ethical? Because we've kind of based our entire existence around the idea of full-time employment. What does this mean now? What does it mean to people's livelihoods? How do they work? What we're finding is people are moving into that part of the economy voluntarily because they want the agency and the flexibility, and large organizations have let them down in that regard. So it's kind of fascinating. I could go on and on to that. Overall, NASA, we've put together an entire portfolio where we can do prizes and challenges, we can bring in these freelance experts, we can do microtasking, we can do program support, and we've really experimented and found that the crowd can actually get you almost anything. That there are ways to kind of do this. Now it's hard, you gotta know what you're doing, you gotta partner with the crowds that know what they're doing, but we've done about 850 of these projects. 95% are successful, we have some success, and about 75%, this is kind of unexpected, are cheaper than if the people had tried to do traditional methods, right? So we asked them, what would you have done to solve this problem if you hadn't come to us and run an open innovation challenge or found a freelancer? And 75% of the time they will say it would have cost us way more. In fact, the average cost savings is 50%. And we think we've saved the government in excess of $170 million, more than we have spent. So this is kind of my almost get off the stage chart. Is look, in my opinion, open is the future, and because of the rate of change, if you're not innovating, it's not optional anymore. You got to be innovating. these crowds are getting increasingly better. The expertise and skill is driven by passion in many cases, which is something that we wish for in our organizations. And this is just a really important tool for folks to understand and use. It isn't easy. Like, that's the tricky part. Like, don't just go out and, appoint your HR person or your marketing person and say, go stand me up an open innovation program. That will fail. I can guarantee you that will fail. But getting a team together, Center of Excellence, a team that can study this stuff, understand it, get the contracts with the folks that know how to do it, it is a valuable, valuable tool and can be done. On the larger stage, NASA's got a lot going on in the space economy, right? There's all sorts of folks doing space now that weren't doing it. It's multiple billions of dollars in that economy. If you want to get involved with NASA, not necessarily an open innovation, although we post all of our stuff on challenge.gov as well as on this NASA site, nasa.gov/get-involved. It will map you through. If you're a startup, if you're a business, if you're a student, it will help you find the opportunities that we have. Because NASA has many, many. We have a SBIR program, we have college and university programs, we have the NIAC, which is very advanced work, we have many grants we do, we have our prizes and challenges program, we have the Tech Transfer, who has a booth here and I think is doing a talk right exactly the same time I am over there. You missed it, sorry. But Tech Transfer, you can license NASA technology and go build a business around it. And it's very cheap. Like, we kind of like to get that out there, so we don't charge a lot for it. But you can find the prizes and challenges, intern programs, doing business with NASA, all at that site. And we're trying every day to improve that front door so that folks can get there. So we've got about 4 or 5 minutes here for questions. I know this kind of forum isn't great for questions, but yeah. Mm-hmm. So, in my opinion, open innovation fits into whatever. He talked about RIZ, ARIZ, as an innovation methodology. This fits into almost any innovation methodology because almost all innovation methodologies have a discovery phase. And the discovery phase these days requires going outside in a way to find those technologies, those ideas, those experts. Let me give you an example. You can have an internal innovation group all day long. But let's just say that you have a product that has a sensor in it, and way over here is quantum sensing. And I'm God, I know that quantum sensing is going to quadruple the performance of your product if you use it. How many quantum sensors experts do you have on your team, or that even knows quantum sensing exists and that might happen? Probably none, right? So they will remain blind to something that's coming, whereas someone in the crowd can go, oh, well, they should be looking at quantum sensing. You see what I'm saying? Open innovation is simply an augmentation to whatever innovation program you have going. It's not going to solve all, because it will help you discover solutions. Now, it can discover early stage and it can discover late stage products that are ready to go, right? So it can help you at all levels of technology readiness level, but you've got to have a program where you're actually bringing those innovations to reality. Okay.
They go through the phases of trials, product trials and all that. So how does this deal with that? A company wants to associate with you for innovation. They would like to have a record of tests and trials.
Yeah, okay. It's really hard to hear from up here. But I think what you're saying is, do you work with us or do you work with somebody else? Yeah. No. Do you work with us? Yeah, it's finding the right platforms out there that work for what you need, like what kind of problems you're doing. We provide that for the federal government, and we provide that kind of access. But I don't think I answered your question, but we can maybe talk after. Yeah. Yeah.
So I missed a portion of your talk because I had to run another meeting. But as far as this open crowdsourcing, a lot of us are trying to obviously have a sustainable business model.
Mm-hmm.
How are we supposed to have passion behind what we do and still make money with an open source kind of crowdsourcing model?
Yeah. So how do you maintain passion in what you do with this open model out there? It's a good question. I personally think the open innovation and open talent models are a very freeing area because they're not going to do everything. Like it's a fairly narrow area. It's a necessary area. But if you're passionate about something, open innovation contests, nobody's going to keep you from doing that. Like, in fact, we've had researchers come to us and say, I'm so glad you had this as a contest because my PI never would have let me go down this line of inquiry because it was too risky. But I was passionate about it and I wanted to do it, right? In the open talent world, you know, you get to map your path and the gatekeepers aren't there anymore that require you to get that full-time employment piece. And so the bar is different there. So we're starting to see crowds of neurodiverse folks that never would have been able to get through an interview that are now being utilized through this model in ways that are exciting. So there's usually a pro and a con on that because as a worker, you can sometimes be competing against that, which is I think where you were coming from. But it is a more robust model in a lot of ways. And again, I'm not selling the model. I'm just more saying it is out there. It is happening. If you don't have a strategy to address open talent and open innovation in your organization, you probably should be thinking about doing that because it is a valuable tool. And that's not for everyone. Definitely don't use it on everything, but it is a new thing that we're finding is really helpful. Okay, I've got a big red flashing light. If you have other questions, I'm happy to stick around afterwards. Thank you so much.